Project Sapient is a podcast meant to engage our brothers and sisters in the law enforcement and military communities in conversations that we all know we need to have. All opinions you'll hear are our own, are protected by our First Amendment of the United States Constitution, and in no way reflect or are meant to reflect the opinion of any specific agency, officer, or service member. Some opinions may be controversial. Listener discretion is advised. Enjoy. Hello, Iman.
Hello, Pete.
What's going on, buddy?
What's up, dude?
Hey, did you see our numbers?
Yeah.
We're up over 6,000.
It's crazy.
It's fucking nuts, right?
That's
People are actually listening to us.
It's kind of scary.
It is. Oh, man. So, guys, first and foremost, we want to say thank you to our listeners from all over the world. We want to thank you to our supporters, Havoc Journal, GymJunkies.com, VectorShields.com, WellnessForWarriors.live. As always, we love those ladies. LiveBoston617.org, EagleEyeFirearmsMA.com, ODKit.com, and GunTrack.app. We love you. We love you. We love you. One more thing, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. YouTube is fucking with us continuously. They're not getting it out there. Please subscribe just to give it to them, okay? So, Iman, talk to me, brother.
Hey, before we get into it, I realized that the new thing now is hoarding gas, kind of like the hoarding toilet paper.
My God, man.
I'm waiting for the rapture. I'm at the point where I'm like, you know what? Just
do it.
Just do it. I mean,
what have I been saying for the last year, dude? I've been saying for the last year, I'm waiting for the fucking asteroid to hit. I want to see everybody panic.
Listen, some of the pictures I see on the interwebs of people filling up oil drums worth of gas and all.
Did you see the trash bag one I sent?
Yeah, there was one I found where this lady was putting gas in a plastic tot thing.
Makes sense.
I'm like, oh,
let's do it.
So, anyways, before I get too much off topic, speaking of the rapture, have you seen? So, I shared it with you, and I'm sure our fellow law enforcement officers in the community noticed that a police department in Georgia.
Turn your phone off. Go on.
Decided to use what they call shoot to incapacitate.
Oh, shoot to incapacitate
Option for their
fucking
officers.
Idiots.
And we're going to get into it. So we actually have a very special guest on tonight who's going to really chime in and give us the medical, the biological, everything that has to do with the human body.
Right.
And it's going to be great. So let's just...
So, well, here's the thing, right?
Yeah.
So Georgia just launched this bullshit.
Yeah.
And you could tell from listening to this chief that I'm sorry to say it, he sounds like a coward to me.
Yeah.
Right? And it sounds like he's trying to be cool. He's trying to be like with the times. He's trying to all that. But what you can clearly see is that he's scared shitless of his community. Right.
Here's the thing. He's scared. To me, you just set up your officers for failure.
Exactly.
And we will explain all this to the non-officers and even to people that are listening, just so you will understand exactly. Because I come from a military background. I was at war and also a police officer and SWAT, and Pete, SWAT operator himself with the large agency. We don't understand this.
Yeah.
Really don't understand it. So why don't we just play the video, actually? Yeah, why don't we play the video?
So let me get the doc on.
Oh, yeah.
Right, so guys, everybody has opinions. Everybody has observations that they make. We bring the specialists on.
Yes.
Guys that really know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That have tried and true tested experience in the field, in emergency medicine, gunshots and whatnot. So let me get him off of mute. Dr. Peter Bevins, are you there, sir?
I am.
Thank you so much for coming on. Can you hear us okay?
I can, clearly.
Great. So you heard everything with our introduction. We're going to be playing a video right now, and you'll be able to hear it as well. There it is. So give it a second and listen to this.
You too.
We're out here today at our firing range. our officers are going through this week their annual qualifications, and we're also incorporating a familiarization course on our shoot to incapacitate option that we're now giving to all of our officers in their use of deadly force.
Hold on, Pete.
How you doing? Can I get you to calm down, sir?
It's boiling.
Calm down a little bit, sir. Sir, drop the piece of wood. As a result of my experiences internationally back in 2004, doing some exchange with the Israeli police, and then some work with the State Department, and then most recently in the last 5 or 6 years with the International Association of Chiefs of Police, it became increasingly clear that many nations train their officers to shoot to incapacitate, if that's possible.
Quick comment. I can't help myself. Quick comment.
All right, go ahead.
Many nations are training their officers to shoot to incapacitate.
Yeah.
Many nations don't have the level of fucking violence that we do.
Yeah.
The type of violence that we do.
Yeah.
And if they do, it's on another extreme. It's a militaristic fucking violence.
If you want to chime in, the Israeli police, that's a whole different level of police.
Exactly.
Whole different level.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
I'm sorry.
Let's
My blood's boiling.
Yeah.
In
In
Woosah.
2019, I introduced that concept to our firearms instructors and asked them to think about it. And several months later, early 2020, we agreed to go ahead and research and develop a protocol that would allow for incapacitation shots.
So the whistle's what's going to signify him reaching down
Here's the
and
whistle.
picking up that object, okay?
No.
You're going to fire 2 into any green or yellow section of the target.
Drop the wood! Drop the wood!
All police officers, when you attend the police academy through your firearms training, we're taught to shoot for the center of available body mass, which generally, through the training that we incorporate, includes the chest cavity. So what we've done is we began to incorporate or give another option that we've are calling shoot to incapacitate.
All right. I'm stopping it. I'm stopping it. I can't listen to this anymore. All right. So, Doc, how are you, sir?
We're doing fine here. I'm listening to this guy describe things, and I'm not sure that the people who are being shot at are going to always agree to be incapacitated.
Yeah.
Well, before we get ahead, give us a little bit for our listeners, a little bit about your background, sir.
All right. Well, I graduated from medical school in '78 and completed a surgical training program in '83 and went into the new field of emergency medicine right away, and have been board certified 3 times.
Wow.
I've seen a lot of trauma and been able to take care of multiple gunshot wounds at the same time, and seen people survive gunshot wounds well and die of knife wounds. So,
so you kind of know what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's a very interesting thing to watch how each case is a complete individual. Some people are going to cower and freeze at the sound of the gunshot.
Right.
But the gunshot wound is a burning pain, and if you hurt somebody, sometimes that just makes them more angry, and of course the adrenaline will flow. The person will become perhaps more erratic, and will start acting like the fight or flight response that people get with adrenaline.
So
there's also the freeze response too, which a lot of people forget about. But if you have a bunny rabbit in the field, he's going to freeze sometimes.
Right.
Or the frog might freeze, and people freeze.
I call it deer in headlights.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, Iman, you wanted to start talking about this article. It was a Police One article that we had found this video on.
Yeah.
There was a lot of commentary on the Police One article.
Oh my God, yeah. Let me just bring up a couple of the comments.
So bring it in, and then we'll slowly get into like the science behind everything with the doc too.
So here's a couple of the comments. So, having previously heard a presentation from Chief Dekmar on leadership, I think he is intelligent, well-intentioned. However, I think this concept will not survive the first lawsuit following a real application, even if everything went according to plan. An officer managed to wound a mentally disturbed person wielding a hand-delivered weapon without killing them. aside from the litany of worst potential outcomes, I don't think our legal system will allow such dangerous blurring of the lines between deadly and less lethal force, which I agree.
Yeah.
I have this other comment I saw from a firearms instructor and former SWAT operator. What this chief proposes sounds great on paper, but is totally unrealistic in real-life applications.
Right.
Most officers will only fire their weapon on a range in a training situation, whether to qualify or during scenario-based training. This is an environment that has little to no stress involved, and even then, a large percentage of those officers are not capable of placing well-aimed shots on a stationary target, which we know that.
We know that.
We know that.
Yeah.
Now introduce stress, raised heart rate, low light conditions, and so many other factors, and many officers would miss a barn even if it was standing inside of it.
Right.
Which, I mean,
it happens.
It happens. It's stress, it's adrenaline, and so he says, I have been with officers who trained and fired thousands of rounds yearly who are not capable of placing rounds in a chest cavity at 15 yards in a real life incident. Yeah, so I mean, again, it sounds like most of these comments are from looks like a lot of trainers, a lot of
real life experience,
stuff like that. So
when you sent this out to me the first time, you had actually been the first person to introduce it to me, and the first thing I noticed was a few years ago we had trained on the 40 Mike with us.
Yeah,
I could see the target. I mean, I could see the target for the less lethal options for less lethal munitions.
Yes.
Right? Like,
that's the target.
You don't want to hit somebody with a 40 millimeter blue nose in the fucking chest cavity.
Yeah. Oh, just so people understand, the civilians, he doesn't mean like a 40 millimeter grenade.
No, yeah.
It's
a foam round.
Yeah, it's a foam round that we put in a 40 millimeter grenade launcher. It's a foam round, and it hits, and the areas that we're supposed to hit, the green are the legs, the arms, if you can get to the arms. But the red area is the chest cavity, the head. Those are the dangerous areas where it could potentially be fatal.
So, and just so everybody's clear, that the blue nose is a very light.
Yeah.
It's a very light round, and the only reason we use the grenade launcher in it is force equals mass times acceleration, right? You need the acceleration.
Exactly.
So that's why it's a very effective tool.
It is.
It's a light round, and it's very effective.
And the targets they're using, though, are for the 40 Mike.
Yeah.
They're the same targets.
It's unbelievable to me. When I saw this, I thought it was like an Onion article, or what is it, Babylon Bee or something. And I'm like,
blog.
I was typing to
Satire.
You, ha 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 ha,
yeah,
and then I'm like, wait a minute,
it's real.
It's fucking real.
Yeah.
So, all right, now that we've got all that out of the way,
let's get into the medical piece of it, where Doc Bevins, you can elaborate on it. So I understand you were talking about how you've treated gunshot wounds yourself and knife wounds. Can you go into that a little bit more?
Well, everyone's different, and every victim of the gunshot wound is going to respond differently. Some people may be crying. Some people may not feel much pain at all. It depends on what tissues they go through. They may be suffering from shortness of breath if they've been hit in the chest. They may be depleted of some of their blood volume, so they may not be thinking clearly. And it's something where you can't really apply a generality to any specific case. And the same thing is if you shoot somebody, you can't predict how they're going to respond to that gunshot wound. You can predict how 100 people may respond, but you're not shooting at 100 people. You're shooting at one guy. So where you hit them, you could have a gunshot wound go right through the abdomen and not cause much trouble, or it could hit the aorta and he could be dead in a minute from bleeding out internally.
And fundamentally, right, when you think about it, Doc, you're 100% right. Every single shooting and every single penetration into the body is completely different. There's a variety of factors.
Yeah.
Whether, something that the person's wearing,
the person's build,
the clothing, the angle of the hit, the fucking velocity of the round, the distance, all that.
All of that.
That people need to understand that even though this is a science, it's not finite.
Yeah.
Right? Yep. It's not like a law of physics.
No. And I believe, Doc, earlier we were talking about how you were treating 2 gunshot victims and a knife victim Could you go into that a little?
One was 2 gunshot wounds. They were handgun gunshot wounds, and both of them had thoracoabdominal, that is, both the chest and the abdomen wounds. One of them was a wound in the abdomen that went into the chest, and both of them were able to be stabilized and transported by helicopter a half an hour into a major trauma center without any significant problems, and just by starting the usual liter of fluid intravenously rapidly. Both were wide awake and refusing to talk to the police about who they were and what they were doing.
No way.
You're kidding me.
No, they were somewhat reluctant to discuss their recent situation.
Yeah. So those two gunshot victims ended up surviving, but then let's segue into the knife victim that you worked.
The knife victim actually was a guy who was drunk, and he was cut in the left biceps by his girlfriend, wife, live-in forever person who was drunk too, and they used to fight a lot. So she cut him in the arm, and he was drunk, and he sat there bleeding for 45 minutes while she watched him bleed. And then she decided to call the ambulance, and he came in, and he was in cardiac arrest from blood loss from his radial artery, or brachial artery, rather. And so he died.
Jesus.
Yeah,
from a knife cut.
Yeah.
The treatment for that would have been, at the scene, a simple tourniquet, a belt or something like that, and that would have saved him. But the person with the abdominal and thoracic wounds, there's no way to put a tourniquet on the chest.
Right.
And the mask trousers, which aren't carried anymore, can help on an abdominal wound, but you don't always know where the bullet is and what the damage is. So abdominal compression doesn't.
Well, here's the thing: people think that a bullet travels straight through a body, or it hits a body and stays in one spot, or whatever. But we all know bullets, once it enters the body, it travels in the body. It doesn't stay where you think it is.
And it may stay in one piece and go through, or it may fragment into multiple pieces,
right,
and do damage in numerous areas.
So let's stop for a second and back up and go back to the fundamentals of stopping a threat, a deadly threat.
Yeah,
stopping a deadly threat, and why we've been trained. Because you know what, Doc, the reason for Project Sapient is we want to open up discussion. We want to look at things. We know we can be wrong about things. Mm-hmm. We want to be as open as possible with things. I personally was trained as a center mass, stop the threat type of person.
Yeah.
Right? Frankly, stop the threat in any means necessary.
Yeah.
Failure drills, 2 to the body, 1 to the brain type of thing.
Yeah.
Right? Could we be wrong? Tell us why, physiologically, the best way to incapacitate or to stop the threat is to shoot center mass.
Well, it depends upon whether or not the guy has a vest on these days,
right,
too.
Yeah.
So he may have something that's going to stop the bullets or slow them down enough so that shooting even the center of mass is not going to make the officer safe.
Right.
Certainly, if you shoot him in the knee, he's going to be angry. He might reflexly drop his firearm or whatever weapon he has, or he may get more angry and unload a 17-round magazine.
Right.
Yeah, you can't predict.
I know we can't
response is.
We can't talk in generalities about gunshots, right? But tell us, if you can, in any general sense, what happens to the human body once it receives that impact.
Well, the initial impact is going to be felt, followed by a slow onset of a burning pain over several more seconds. But some of those pain fibers don't go as quickly as you would expect.
Right.
So the person, even though he has a chance to give up or whatever, he may fire the round. Now, if you have the bullet coming toward you as a bad guy, he has between 0.2 seconds and a second and a half to react. Depends upon how he thinks and so forth. But he's not going to be able to dodge that bullet unless you're 300 yards or more away. And that's when a bullet going maybe out of a standard handgun could be dodged. So he's not going to be doing any dodging. He's going to be hit. And he's going to be able to be hit depending upon how good the marksman is. And the police officer, when they shoot, they don't hit the bullseye every time. They don't hit the kneecap every time.
Right.
They go outside the rings sometimes, and you're not going to have any positive effect on that, and it's not going to distract the assailant. It's not going to make him drop his gun. Then if he gets hit, not only is he going to start having adrenaline pumping, but most of the time the officer's going to have adrenaline pumping.
Right.
So you're both going to have some more jitteriness, and you're going to be using major muscles. Blood is flowing to those major muscles. You may be having trouble seeing if it's bright light because your pupils dilate. So if you're looking into the sun, you can't even see what's going on now.
Right.
And you have to wing it from that point on. Duck, get out of the way, run away, whatever.
So tell me, Doc, what you know about auditory and visual exclusions in high stress environments and high stress scenarios like shootings and stuff like that. Because in my experience, like I've been to officer involved shootings, and you talk to groups of officers and weird things happen to the body.
Yeah.
Right. Like you could talk to an officer and he'll start saying really random shit. Mm-hmm. Like I washed my dog, and you're like, what? Yeah. Or you'll ask them, how many rounds did you fire? And they don't know. Or they'll say 5 and he actually fired 2.
Yeah.
And it's not that the officer is lying. It's that things happen to the brain and to the body, and people don't realize that. Can you get into that at all for our listeners? And keep in mind, there's listeners, there's law enforcement, there's military, and then there's also civilians that are learning from our show. So if you can get into that, that'd be helpful.
Well, if you're listening to something on the radio and someone in the back seat says something, you may not register what they are talking about. You say, what did you say, or whatever, and the same thing's going to happen. You may not hear things around you. You may not hear another assailant. You may not hear a vehicle.
Right.
You may and you may not recall it because it's not part of your memory. You were concentrating on that. So your memory of hearing, not only is it distorted by the adrenaline and so forth and the noise, but it's also not recalled. So remembering that is a problem. Your vision is better in the dark because your pupils dilate, so you gather more light. But also when your pupils dilate, your focus is poorer. So you may not be able to see or maintain a visual analysis of what the assailant is actually doing, especially if you're looking into the sun.
So I had, it really just brought up a memory that I haven't thought about in years. This was even pre-SWAT days. I remember talking to an officer maybe 10 years ago, and he was in an officer-involved shooting. Mm-hmm. And one of the things he had told me was, this is actually good that we have the doc on the line to see if there's any, not validity, but just to see what his thoughts are on this. He had told me that he remembers his first shot. He remembers his muzzle flash. Mm. It was a dark night. It was a really dark area. The muzzle we know is really bright, right? He remembers his muzzle flash and then doesn't remember seeing his second or third shot, even though his body pulled the trigger, right? What do you think on that, Doc? Do you think that the senses are so heightened because of going back to the adrenaline flow and all that that physiologically things like that can happen? Are they a standard? Are they a norm? Is it something that we should look out for? Like, what do you think?
It's very simple. If you have somebody do flash photography and you see a bright light, and that makes your dark vision, your night vision, ruined.
The cones and receptors in your eyes are screwed.
Minutes later.
Right. This is something that I remember dealing with NVGs, night vision, and doing a lot of that stuff with IR and all that. So that's another thing that people need to realize, is that these external forces are fucking with the person doing the shooting.
Well, here's the thing, right? External forces, right? And so now, you know, an officer shows up, you know, he's got a call, person with a knife, emotionally disturbed person, whatever. They're on their way to the call, right? They're getting all the stimulus now from whether it's dispatch, the computer, you know, other officers en route to the scene. So there's all this stimulus going on with the officer as they're going to this call. They get to the call and they're the first ones there, right? Now you have even more stimuli. All right, you need to quickly assess, de-escalate if possible. Talk them down, figure out what's going on, what the problem is. If the person is not there, you're talking to witnesses. People are screaming. You got people pointing, hey, go this way, go that way. There's a thousand things going on. Now you've got the guy with the knife. He wants, we'll say, suicide by cop. He wants you to pull the trigger. He gives you no choice. All right. So Doc, from that point, with this training of shoot to incapacitate, now all this adrenaline, all this stuff is being dumped on the officer.
It's being dumped on the officer, and the adrenaline is pumping in the guy with a knife too.
Exactly.
And there were instances of, and there are nice videos about these things in a few instances of people being shot with an entire 6 rounds and still coming at the officer to try to kill him with a knife.
Yeah. The body does superhuman things.
He gets hit with what are fatal rounds, but they're not immediately fatal.
Right.
It takes a while to bleed out through a hole. And
well, here's the thing. Drugs are, PCP, some of these really synthetic drugs, the body will not realize. It would not register in the brain that it took a fatal shot or whatever is happening with the body. I mean, I remember back in the academy watching some of these like old school videos of someone high on PCP where this person was even shot in the head, yet he was still fighting and trying to kill the officer.
I remember fighting with somebody on PCP.
So add that to it. To an EDP who's got all sorts of narcotics in him, because usually, I mean, from my experience, every time I deal with an EDP, it's not just they're off their meds. There's also other narcotics going on in them.
The plus factor.
So their adrenaline's rushing. The officer's adrenaline's rushing. The officer's now not left with any choice, pulls his firearm out because he's faced with a life and death situation. And not only his own life and death of the public around him.
Right.
Because here's the thing, which brought up actually a police trainer brought this up, Doc, and he said, if you're dealing with an EPD who's suicidal, there's a potential that they can also be homicidal.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you think of that statement, Doc?
That's true too. And some people will smoke something that someone gives them, or take a pill that someone gives them, telling them this is going to be just great. And it turns out it wasn't marijuana, it was stevia or bath salts or something else.
They want to eat someone's face off now.
Yeah.
And I've had people standing up on stretchers naked, uncontrollably.
Sounds like me on a Friday night.
Half an hour coming in perfectly sober, acting completely irrationally. And the medicine's getting to their system, and they are so out of it. And they may be out of it for hours or days, depending upon how they react to the medicine and how much they took. But everybody was saying, all he did was smoke marijuana. Yeah, right. It didn't turn out to be just marijuana.
He smoked marijuana laced with something else. It's also like, even take drugs out of the situation, right? I mean, how many times have you encountered someone who was at first glance, on first approach, was perfectly normal, perfectly fine. And then the switch went off and it went into pure rage.
Oh my God, yeah.
How many times?
I can't count.
Right. How many times have you dealt with the 100-pound girl? I know it sounds cliched, but it's happened to me. On my back, 100-pound woman, and I can't subdue her.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. I even got one better. A 100-pound woman who's also an MMA fighter.
Oh, fuck. But
dude,
like,
it was quite the fight.
The human body does some really fucking crazy things, right? Personally.
Yeah.
I had an experience years ago in SWAT school with OPSEC involved. I tore something that, and I'm not the strongest guy in the world, right? Mm-hmm. But through the adrenaline, through everything that was going on, I tore something that is impossible to tear.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like the running joke going on for years after that. Yeah. And it wasn't like patting myself on the back. It was, holy shit, look what the body can actually do. Yeah. It's even going into like the you hear the stories all the time of the grandma lifting the back of a car to get the kid under it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
The people need to understand that, yes, this is a science, but when the stressors are involved, when the outside influences are involved, when the chemicals through the drugs are involved, then you have all the forces from the impact, the round, the munition, everything. Yeah. It's not a science.
No, and here's the thing, and Doc, you could probably attest to it, especially when your pupils are dilated, and the person's coming at you to kill you. The first place you're gonna go, I mean, I from my experience, my training, and all that is you're going straight for the biggest part of the body that you can see,
the biggest target,
and Doc, if you can elaborate on that a little more.
Well, the target you're shooting for is to hit lungs and heart and upper abdominal organs. And if you have a round that's going to fragment, then it may get more than one of those things. But you want to do something that's going to work the first shot. Nothing's going to be reliably able to work the first shot every time. And you've got somebody who originally might have been listening to you, and then they've got this, make me, when you get into an argument situation. So they suddenly change their mindset, and they come toward you. And you're now having to decide whether or not you need to shoot again and again. Right. And you can put 6 or 8 rounds into somebody into those areas, and their legs are still working because you didn't shoot their legs, and their arms are still working, and they have a gun in their hand or a knife in their hand or a club or something else.
So let's go now into this whole shoot incapacitate, right? Where now we've got all these external forces, and the option, this police department in Georgia is given the option to the officer, shoot incapacitate, where now the officer goes to shoot for the legs, but under high stress situation. Let's say the guy is 15 yards away from you. Let's give out the 21 foot rule, right, Doc? Where someone's coming at you, you're 21 feet away, all right? And in that stimuli, somebody running at you, and we do this drill all the time with simunitions, with SWAT, and even applied patrol procedures at the academies, where we'll do the 21-foot rule and go full speed at an officer.
Mythbusters did it.
Yeah, Mythbusters did it. Yeah, and I can't even see or be able to think that I need to aim to the legs. Right. That's a deadly force situation. So, but like the way I see with this whole aiming at the legs, it's setting up for failure. And I think, Doc, you can elaborate more on the dangers of shooting at the leg and the pelvic region, and elaborate on that a little more.
Well, in order to be de-escalating, and the guy may have a knife in his hand at his side, you haven't even drawn your gun yet.
No.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
So you've got that 0.2 to 1.5 second decision-making time, and then you have to draw the gun, and you have to do some sort of directing of the gun, aiming it, and not using your sights. The last thing you want to do is use your sights at that situation.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you don't use your sights, how are you going to hit the knee in a moving target? Because everything you shot at the range is stable.
Yes.
Stationary. In my opinion, if you're in a range qualifying, maybe 1 out of 10 of your shots should be at stationary targets, and the rest of them should be moving with hostages and dogs and innocent people in the neighborhood, so that you're having to think and understand that when you get into the situation, that you're going to have to think clearly, and it's not easy to think clearly. But if you haven't trained on the range to do things in a situation where there's stress and trauma and movement and civilians and people in the background and strobe lights causing you to lose your night vision and all these sorts of things, it's a waste of time. You can know how the gun loads and unloads and the trigger makes it go bang.
Yeah.
But that's not what happens in the street.
That's why when a lot of times we started introducing, during our night ranges, we started introducing cruisers with lights.
Yeah.
Just to get, I think I told you the story before. We went to a range in Massachusetts that had blue lights, the strobe lights.
Yeah.
And my buddy, who's like the most amazing shot on the planet, right? I turned them on and he was like, oh shit, turn those off. And I was like, why? And he's like, because I can't fucking see. And I'm like, what are you talking about?
No, it's perfect training.
It's perfect fucking training.
Yeah.
Right. And yeah, it was harder. It was fully admit it was 100% harder.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But now every time I go, I flick those fuckers on.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. So let's, Doc, so pelvic region and on down, let's talk about the dangers, especially if a bullet fragments. Let's say the officer intended to incapacitate, not kill, to incapacitate. And he or she take that shot, and from the pelvic region down, what sort of arteries and bad spots are there? I mean, that could potentially the suspect end up bleeding out.
Well, the femoral artery is about the size of your little finger, and the inferior aorta is about the size of your thumb, roughly speaking. So you've got something the size of a garden hose, which may have a leak or it may be completely transected. And so you can bleed out very quickly from that. In Steve Scalise's situation, it went into his leg and into the pelvic area. But if he was on the ground with a gun, he could have shot back.
Right.
He was not able to do that, and other people were there. But he survived a fatal wound because he got treatment.
Immediate treatment, right.
Quickly lucid at the time. And so if you get something that took miraculous coordination to save, he otherwise would not have made it. But he still could have fought back those many minutes that he was lying on the ground.
You see it in some of the officer-involved shootings. When the cop gets shot, a lot of times you still see them shooting back. You still see a lot of fight back, which is, unbelievable under the circumstances. Just recently in New Mexico.
Yeah, the officer that got hit.
You saw that hit. He fell over like a fucking ton of bricks.
And he got shot in the arm.
Yeah,
and got right back into the fight. Did not even did what he had to do.
And we're not. Let's be clear, right? We're not saying that everybody is going to react that way. You don't know how you're going to react.
No, you don't.
Right?
Until the day you tested.
Knock on wood. Let's knock on wood. It's not going to happen to us, right? Mm-hmm. But you don't know how the human body is going to react.
Yeah.
Like even the doc was talking about Scalise.
Yeah.
That could have been a millimeter off. One of those rounds could have been a millimeter off, and he would have bled out within a minute?
Yeah.
Certainly could have.
Yeah.
Doc, I want to ask you a question about body armor. We all wear it in different forms, in different ways, depending on the op and all that. But a lot of times we've been starting to see, it's enough where it's, piqued my attention. I've been starting to see suspects with body armor.
Mm-hmm.
Body armor, people need to realize, isn't an end-all situation. It's not bulletproof.
No.
Right? And when you think about the dynamics of how Kevlar works, it's a fibrous material that basically absorbs impact.
Exactly.
Right?
It spreads the impact out.
It spreads the impact out.
Yeah.
That's why there's a misconception that it's okay to get Kevlar wet. It's okay for a certain amount of time. After 5 years, you really should be replacing it, in my opinion. But anyway, talk to us about what happens when somebody gets shot with body armor and the effects, the internal effects, the kinetic energy that goes through the body at that point, even though there's no penetration.
Well, it's like getting hit with a baseball bat or something like that. It's a blow that's going to hurt you. It's going to get your attention, but it doesn't end up piercing and causing internal damage the same way. Yes, it can cause, in rare instances, a deep bruise or even interrupt the cardiac cycle, just like the rare case of a little leaguer who gets hit in the chest just during a wrong time in the cardiac cycle, and they go into a cardiac arrhythmia, which they can survive if someone gives them CPR right away. But those sorts of things can happen, and yet if you get hit while wearing body armor, you should still be able to retaliate with your gun or knife. It depends on how the person reacts and what size round that you hit with and where you get hit.
Well, look at the Los Angeles bank robbery.
Yeah.
The fucking havoc that those guys
Oh my God, yeah.
did, and they were wearing head to toe body armor.
Yeah.
And how many rounds did it take?
They were being shot by handguns in that situation.
Yeah, and I believe the cops had to break into a gun store to get rifles,
actual
right?
rifles. Yeah, to shoot back, to fire back. I think that was the birth of the SWAT movement.
Yeah, it was.
After that.
It was. So the adrenaline flow, Doc, and I know you had started talking about it. We kind of cut you off. Let's get back into it. Typically, what happens when the adrenaline starts flowing through the system? Explain it to us from a physiological point. Like, I know a lot of it starts in the kidneys too, right? And it kind of goes up through the body.
Right. It's the adrenal glands, which are right next to the kidneys.
Right.
And it takes several seconds to have adrenaline go through your body. If you've ever had a shot of adrenaline for an allergy, you realize it gets into the system really quickly, even though you may just put it into the subcutaneous tissue, into the skin. It really is a fast chemical. And it causes the muscles to become more contractile. That is, they get stronger. And when you move a muscle and it's stronger, the signal that you sent to move it makes it contract faster and stronger, so it causes you to be jittery and shaky.
Okay.
Too much coffee. In other words, you overshoot. Unless you have adrenaline going through your body all the time, you don't adapt to that, and that's not a normal thing.
If you're desensitized.
But even surgeons will skip caffeine in the morning if they have to do delicate surgery, just so that their muscles are less stimulated by various things, and caffeine being one of them. So you get more contractility, which makes you less accurate as far as fine motor activity. You get a dilation of the pupils, which we mentioned. You get a rush through your system, which may make you think differently. You may focus on things. You may minimize things, such as sounds coming in. They may be muffled. They may not feel as much. The burning pain of the gunshot wound that you receive may be less bothersome to you. It doesn't get to you. It doesn't stop you as much as it would have if you were to say have somebody do it electively, like a post-op wound that's in the same area of the body. Say your leg, you have knee surgery or something like that. That's not going to make you act differently. It's not going to make you dilate your pupils. Yet it may be the same level of pain. Whereas the adrenaline release due to the gunshot wound is going to have those effects.
Now,
it's going to cause you to be able to breathe better. We use adrenaline for people with asthma, but that's not going to make a difference in this situation because most people who are shot are already breathing all right. So that doesn't change how you react, but it's one of the things that the adrenaline will do.
Let me ask you this, Doc. Now we're talking
It may
about breathing.
It may also cause you to defecate and urinate. And you pick up an animal, it'll do that to you too.
Right.
It's not always defensive. That's part of the whole contractile thing.
So we do a lot of, and we practice it on special ops a lot, is a lot of the box breathing, the combat breathing. I feel, is it directly tied to lowering your adrenaline, or is it tied to lowering anything else in your body? Like, now that you're talking about adrenaline in a scientific and physiological way, is it the adrenaline that's being targeted?
No, well, the adrenaline doesn't make you breathe faster or slower. It's the situation that makes you breathe faster or slower. The airways just happen to dilate, and you don't notice it because your airways are already working just fine. So,
interesting.
But they talk to you about the breathing so that you won't move your arms and legs and change your stance as your chest increases and decreases in size. And they may want you to breathe with your abdominal muscles so your rib cage doesn't expand, because your shoulder blade attaches to the rib cage, and your clavicle may also move with those movements. So if you can do abdominal breathing, and that's hard to do, but you may do it on the range. And people who do professional target shooting will often have a vest that's basically lined with plywood, so that the chest won't move at all. And they do all their breathing through the up and down movement of the diaphragm into the abdomen.
I've never heard that.
So interestingly, Doc, I do a lot of powerlifting, and a lot of the powerlifting involves the belly breathing. And that's something like I'm so accustomed to now, is the belly breathing, where I don't really breathe. It's not like I'm breathing into my lungs all the time or whatever, but the belly breathing is something I always do. And just thinking about, like, when I'm out there training, shooting, whatever, it's 100% true. I'm not breathing into my chest. I'm breathing into my belly all the time.
Right.
And now that I'm thinking about it, that makes perfect sense. That if you're breathing into the chest, you're expanding your shoulders. Shot placement's going to be different. It's actually that's pretty fascinating.
So, Doc, I want to ask you, in your professional opinion, in your expertise in science and medicine, do you think that teaching these officers, and again, keep in mind, we have officers listening, we have civilians listening, we have people that like to be educated on these matters listening. In your professional opinion, teaching officers to shoot in this ridiculous, I don't know what, to incapacitate, good, bad? Should we be focusing on it? Should we deviate from it? What do you think?
Well, you have to apply a generality here, and the generality is not going to help you unless you've had a previous conversation with the assailant to determine his attitude toward his wounds. Yeah. And if you know how he's responded to wounds in the past, then that's fine. But if you don't know how he responds to wounds, if you don't know his mental state, if you don't know his ability to fight you, then you're going to be picking a less effective deterrent if you hit a less effective area of the body.
So what you're saying, saying is this is the stupidest thing you have ever heard of.
Well, I've heard of more stupid things, but you don't have the officers out there armed with boomerangs.
Well, I mean, the way I see it, right? So to me, and same, I'm sure same with Pete and the majority of officers. Again, that 80-20 split. So we'll talk about the true officers that are out there doing the work. When we unholster our firearm, we mean to use it because we were put in a position that there was no other option. And if there's no other option, this shoot to incapacitate is is not going to be what I'm going to be looking for. It's because that person is shooting at me or drew the firearm or had that knife and is coming at me with the knife. I mean, it's true. If I see somebody with a knife at their side in a non-threatening manner, yeah, my hand's on my firearm. It's not drawn yet.
Right.
I'm just posturing, getting ready for it. Right. If anything changes, that's 100% true. But like you said, Doc, though, when you're engaging with somebody and you're talking to them and you can tell their intent is suicidal/homicidal, they kind of put you in a bad spot. And this and I believe with this type of training, this type of option being presented to officers. Now, here's the thing: a regular police department, they qualify twice a year, maybe. And all they're given is 100 rounds. Each officer gets 100 rounds, and they qualify.
Yeah.
So
what do they qualify for? They qualify to hit paper targets.
Yeah, paper targets, exactly. Paper targets that no stress. There's no stress inoculation really, unless it's SWAT or whatever. It's a kind of relaxed atmosphere, so everyone can pass. Especially the ones that struggle to shoot. They'll be able to pass without the stress. Now add the stress in a real life situation. You're not shooting at a paper target anymore. Or you show up and, for example, here's the thing: some patrol officers have less than lethal shotguns in their vehicles. Here's again the lawyer slash whatever for liability. Question's going to be asked, well, why didn't you use a less than lethal shotgun that you had in your trunk or on your gun rack? Why did you shoot my client in the femoral artery and the shoot to incapacitate, and he ended up bleeding out and dying, and you're being sued by the family and everything. So it opens it up.
Yeah, one thing they haven't taken into account is every time you make a rule, you make lawyer fodder. You give the lawyer another way to weasel in to a jury or a judge, a way that his client was mistreated, maligned, treated in a way that should not have been used in that circumstance. And so the less you have as far as rules and regulations, the better off the officer is, and the more likely he is to be able to make a best decision in that circumstance. But anytime you start having a whole grocery list of different things that they should take into account, the more mistakes are going to be made, and the more difficult it's going to be to get a conviction and feel good about what you did as an officer.
Right.
Well, that's the thing that where I've read somewhere, I forgot where, but someone made a comment about too many. Again, it's one of those too many options will happen with too many mistakes, right? So when you have all these options presented to you, and we've talked about it before, when you're sitting in a cruiser and you've got all this stimulus between the computer, the radio, the phone's going off, and you're just sitting there trying to do a report,
right?
And you've got all this stimulus coming at you. It gets a bit much, and your fine motor skills diminishes really quickly with those stresses, and as we've spoken before, to me, shooting at the leg is one of those fine motor type things, where it would be a police sniper if they're able to take that shot,
even as a sniper,
Right. Well, that's the thing, but I mean, I've seen one video where a sniper actually shot the gun out of the dude's hands,
right?
And I was like, dude, that's a 1 in a million shot, but it was a great shot.
If you think you can do it, you do it. That's what you're taught in the sniper and anti-sniper stuff, right?
Yeah,
if you think you can, do it.
Yeah, exactly.
But we're not going to train people that way.
No, well, for frontline officers, that is a different level of training.
Right.
That's a different budget. That's a different amount of money that you got to spend on to get your officers that proficient.
If you're in an area where there are houses and you shoot somebody in the knee, he might pull the trigger. But now where is that gun aimed?
That's true.
Exactly.
That's true, too, the flinch response.
So you're going to endanger other officers and bystanders, people in windows, and of course every bullet that goes up comes down.
Yeah.
So I'm going to make a statement, and I want Ayman and the doc to tell me what you think about this statement. We should stop focusing on this bullshit, because no matter what the shooting circumstance is going to be, no matter what the scenario is going to be, it's going to be all over the fucking place. It's not a science. It's not a direct science of law of physics per se, right? Things are going to be all over the place. And adding these types of curriculums to teaching officers how to shoot the dick or how to shoot the leg or the arm. The forearm's okay, but the fingers are in the yellow zone.
Yeah.
Right? Is a recipe for disaster.
Oh, absolutely. I agree with that one commenter where he said it's not going to survive past the first lawsuit.
100%.
It to me, this is what happens when the good idea fairy really takes over.
That's right. It's the good idea fairy, and that's all it is.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
Yeah. If you had Mythbusters taking on this situation, they wouldn't have a paper target. They'd have a dummy moving with people in front of it.
Oh, yeah.
So that's the way they should train.
Yeah.
If they want to train to shoot in the knees, they should have a whole line of knees that are moving.
Yeah, exactly.
You're right. You're 100% right.
100% right.
It's unbelievable, Doc, but listen, you've been an absolutely amazing asset to this show.
Absolutely.
I think
great to have you.
I think a lot of people are going to listen to this show and get very informed and very educated on a lot of these things.
Yes.
So let me say thank you to our supporters.
Go right
Doc, first and foremost, thank you so much. We're going to have you back on the show. We're going to have you as an asset as much as possible, just letting you know. Want to thank our supporters, Havoc Journal, Gym Junkies, Vector Shields, WellnessForWarriors.live, LiveBoston617.org, Eagle Eye Firearms MA, ODKit.com, GunTrack.app. Thank you to our thousands of listeners, our growing YouTube. We love you. Stay safe.
Stay sapient.